Hey everybody, I am AC Braddock. I am the CEO of Eden Labs. We are a 25-year-old extraction technology company that also does a lot of R&D and other botanicals as well, which I'm going to touch on a little bit in this presentation on successful product development, processing, politics, and purpose. It's kind of a big topic, and I can do more on this, I think, when we are live once again and together, which I think is looking like it's going to be in sometime in August, we're hoping. But we are here. I'm in Seattle. We're in the middle of the COVID crisis, and my presentation is going to touch on that a little bit, because the cannabis industry is always changing. We just discovered the endocannabinoid system in about 1993, which is a blink in the eye in science. And it is really important that hemp and cannabis companies really understand the plant, its genetics, people's genetics, how they work together, and the politics, in order to create successful products and have them be on a platform that solves problems, because every good product should solve a problem. Extraction technology was the catalyst for rapid development of the industry. When I came on in 2009 as CEO for Eden Labs, there were a few states that were medically legal, and it became very apparent that there was no way that the industry was going to move forward quickly without a way to safely make the product and then have people safely ingest it. And that's the crux, and it's a whole new industry, which is exciting. But it is also frustrating at times, because we are politically hindered, and there's a whole lot of people who don't understand what it is we're doing. And that is a big part of your product development as well. This is Charlotte, Fiji, and sadly, she just passed. And if you don't know who Charlotte is, she was the young lady who, she had Dravet syndrome, and she was having 300 plus grand mal seizures a day when her family decided to try cannabis, and this was back in around 2012. And the first strain that they tried was actually called Hippie's Disappointment. And I have to imagine that the reason why they call it Hippie's Disappointment is because it was low in THC. That became Charlotte's Web. And Charlotte became a symbol for the industry, and was interviewed by Dr. Sanjay Gupta on national television, which helped create a lessening of the stigma of what this plant was, and some understanding of how helpful it could be. And one of the big pushbacks politically that we always get when we go into legislative offices, and we're speaking to conservative legislators, because they're always conservative legislators that push back, their first question is, what about the children? And their meaning is, how do we protect the children from this drug? Well, it's not a drug. It's a natural product. And what about the children is children like Charlotte. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and parents and sick parents, and watching your loved ones suffer and die because you don't have access to a plant. And it is criminal that it is criminal. I also want to share with you Jack Split. I was honored to meet Jack and his mother. Jack also sadly passed about 2016. He had cerebral palsy and severe dystonia. And what they were able to get past as a family was medical access for children with these disabilities, utilizing this plant as medicine in schools. And that was 2016, not that long ago. All of this is still really new. But for those of you who don't really know the history of where this industry has come from, it's important that you understand it, because you have to be able to understand that and the political ramifications of what you're doing to create a brand and develop products that are worthwhile and sustainable. This industry is built on the pillars of science, social change, and politics. And in those we have medical, recreational, which I prefer to call lifestyle or conscious consuming, and nutraceutical or phytoceutical. And these all have different pathways currently. They shouldn't, but they do. And the reason that they do is because, once again, it's a political atmosphere. We have to pay close attention to the endocannabinoid system and genetics. And we have to understand our genetics and the genetics of the plant, because product development isn't just taking something apart and putting it back together again. Not with this. You can do that, but it has a lot more to do with how these systems work together and how we pair them and be able to pivot depending on what the current legal and political climate is. And because right now we're in COVID, and there are some changes, and there's some really helpful products that we can be making, but I'm not seeing that many of, interestingly enough. So cannabis has genotypes and phenotypes. I know that in many places people are still talking about sativa and indica, and really the more sophisticated companies and the more sophisticated markets are labeled where they have the top 3 to 5 terpene profiles and the top 5 cannabinoid profiles. So that when you're reading this label, you understand what you're imbibing. Is it high in myrcene? Is it high in pinene? Is it high in THC? Is it high in THCA? I mean, what are these major cannabinoids that you're imbibing, and how are they working within your system to treat specific things as well? And just like reading every other ingredient list you should be reading, this should be a part of it. And as a product developer and a brand creator, it is really important that you educate, because you're creating this market, you're creating a place, and it's an unbelievable opportunity as a business person, as a branding person. People are like, wow, this barely existed before, and like 95% of the people don't even know what this is. We're talking about different kinds of terpene profiles and the differences between major cannabinoids and the minor cannabinoids and how to put those together. They don't know. You have to show them. You have to educate them. Part of all of this is the entourage effect between the cannabinoids, but also the terpene profiles and how those work, because the terpenes actually have physiological effects that are extremely valuable and very effective. So understanding terpene profiles is also important. So what we have today, we used to have a cannabis industry. Because of the Farm Bill that passed, we have a hemp industry and a cannabis industry. And that was good so that we can have access to multiple different hemp products, but the primary push for that was CBD and CBD access. And not a lot is going on with other parts of the plant. They're just utilizing CBD. But one of the big problems with this is the whole supply chain, which many of you who are in hemp understand exactly what I'm talking about here. But it was politically better when we were all one industry. We had more power, we could be more focused on legalizing different aspects of what we were talking about, what we're doing, banking, getting stimulus money, because while this industry has been deemed essential, we don't have banking, and we don't have access to stimulus funding, which is ridiculous. And a lot of reasons why some of these specific towns and states have deemed cannabis essential is because they need the tax funds. They need our money. And yet we aren't really being represented for it. And that needs to change, obviously. What is also interesting about this COVID, it's an opportunity to really start thinking about combining cannabis with other botanicals, other antiviral botanicals, like elderberry and olive leaf and oregano and echinacea and osha root. Very effective antiviral properties. And being able to make combinations of different aspects of the cannabis plant for relaxation and immune regularity is a really powerful way to create new products that solve a social problem, are medical, and are conscious choice. I want to talk a little bit about the supply chain for hemp. It has been devastating. The genetics were not quite, they were ready, but they were not widely available to have a high CBD, low THC profile. And while we were politically able to farm hemp, the stigma was not quite dealt with. So we ended up having farmers go into hemp farming and then have local jurisdictions say, all right, well, if it comes in hot, it comes in with too high THC, you have to burn your field, which is devastating and a ridiculous irony that, oh, it's got a lot of THC in it, let's burn it. But it's been another tragedy put on America's farmers and farmers around the world. I mean, this is 0.03 limit for THC is completely random and arbitrary. It doesn't define a genotype. They're just forcing it on a genotype. So the seed acquisition from the get-go was difficult. And then there is the growing aspect. Do you grow indoors? Do you grow outdoors? You want to make sure it's organic. Then there's the processing piece and the product development and distribution piece, and then there's retail. All of this entire chain has had hiccups in it. And when it comes to product development and education, it's all the same thing. It's all the same process, or should be. And it's a lot to manage. But again, you are creating an entire industry and a whole new way of treating illness and recreating as well. That is far healthier. So the other aspect of this that I'm not really seeing all that much of is a lot of these companies that are growing for CBD aren't involving themselves in circular economics, where you do something business-wise and it keeps going around in a circle until it comes back to a natural source, like cannabis. So you've grown it, you have this product, it biodegrades, or it you use it that also is more friendly and environmentally friendly. So you've got CBD, you've got hemp fiber, you've got hempcrete, you've got clothing, replacing plastics, food. It's such an amazing plant if we utilize it all of it, and just don't focus on one molecule. And right now our entire industry is focused primarily on THC or CBD. And there's so much more in the plant to offer that will also increase your bottom line if you're utilizing the whole thing. One of the big problems I feel, and I think they've been trying to deal with this as far as CBD and fields coming in hot, and that is to, instead of testing the material at harvest, and that's to test the material 6 weeks earlier. And the reason for that is because the plants develop CBG, which is the mother of all cannabinoids. And from there, the other cannabinoids are created. If we pull the harvest early, or if we test early, there will be less THC there. It hasn't been made yet by the plant. So it would have been really smart if we had legalized on CBG and then developed other products around this, understanding where all of these cannabinoids come from, and then growing for them, processing for them, developing products from that place, instead of taking one or two and nobody even really knows about any of these other ones. I've done multiple different investor seminars where I'm like, raise your hand if you know what a terpene is. And many don't. Raise your hand if you know what the endocannabinoid system is, and many don't. And they're investing in businesses that say things like, oh, my product's going to be a full spectrum isolate. I'm hoping many of you are laughing right now because that just doesn't exist. So it's best if we try and grow for the end product. And you do that by paying attention to the genetics and the chemotype and that profile, because it's a very manipulable plant. It's made to do this for us. And if we start looking at it that way, instead of looking at it from single molecule, pharmaceutical pill, one molecule, I mean, that is outmoded science. There are companies like Halo out of Seattle, Washington, who are very forward-thinking. They came out with a CBG product, I think well over a year, maybe 2 years ago. And it's lovely. It has a lot of the same effects of CBD. It's not quite as psychoactive. And it's much easier to grow, pull, and then process for. And any kind of streamlining that you can make in that entire supply chain, the better off you're going to be. And also, if you're creating a product like this and it has components of the minor cannabinoids, it's going to be a better product. There are many studies that are going on still. It's very new. But it is quite evident that the plant in its whole form is far more effective than when you start taking out single molecules. Like CBD has a bell curve. It's effective, it's effective, it's effective, and then if its efficacy starts to drop off. And you can give patients more CBD, but it doesn't do anything. But if you add a whole plant form with all the other minor cannabinoids, then the efficacy starts to increase. And again, it's because it's a system, working within a system. Right now, if it were me and I was making products, this is what I would be making, CBN. Everyone, we're in the middle of COVID, we're in the middle of stay in place, we're in the middle of a presidential election. People are stressed out. And I have a few friends who are doctors, and they are telling me that their patients are having a terrible time sleeping. It's a stress. And then the more stressed you are, the less sleep you have. It destroys your immune system. And CBN is very easy to create as a product. It's basically when THC breaks down, all you have to do is heat it, and it creates CBN. And CBN is great for it. It's a very strong sedative, and it's mildly psychoactive, but it's great for pain. It's anti-inflammatory, because that's another way that the COVID acts with the body, is it creates inflammation. So you want to be able to use whatever you have in your arsenal to be able to reduce inflammation as much as you can. So CBN is anti-inflammatory, it's antibiotic, it helps regulate the immune system, it helps with bone healing and growth. You have to understand this plant in order to create these products. You can't react to the market. Oh, CBD, oh, THC, give me as much in that product. I only want that, I don't care about it, and make it cheap. It's not sustainable, and it's not smart, because you're going to be in a single lane, and once something like COVID happens, or we're able to legalize, maybe that'll happen soon. And then what are you going to do? You'll have all of these opportunities to utilize this plant, and you won't know how to do it. Some of the products, obviously, that you can create are smokable concentrates, pre-rolls, tinctures, vape cartridges, edibles, beverages, topicals, pills and capsules, and then nutraceuticals, where you are mixing and matching with other plants. During COVID, interestingly, the edible market shot up, and the pre-roll market dropped, because people were worried about respiratory issues and smoking, and so that market suffered. But edibles, which have been kind of dicey for a while, are now all the rage. And then vaping also went up. So again, if you can understand this market and the different kinds of products and why people utilize them, because it does solve a social need, then you'll be much better off. When you start to do formulations, you can do a full spectrum, which means you have the full genetic profile of the plant. You're basically pretty much replicating what's in that plant. So then we have broad spectrum, which basically just means there's no THC. You remove the THC. The only reason why you would remove the THC is because of prohibition, because it was so stigmatized from the early 1900s. That is a whole other talk, which I love giving, but we don't have time here. And then we have single molecular isolates in your formulations. All of these have different processing modalities, but you start with the product and you work backwards. And you want to use extraction methodologies that can create as many products as possible with that one system. Creating an isolate is a bit of work and requires numerous kinds of equipment. It does have value, especially now, but I'm just bringing up the full spectrum aspect of it because I do think that eventually we will come to understand that we do need the minor cannabinoids in there as well. One of the things that's interesting when you start getting into product development, obviously, is the science of processing, which we can get into also much deeper if you want to let NOCO know that this is something that you want to get really deep into the processing side of this, because it's a lot of information. But generally for large industrial hemp processing, you want big ethanol systems and large-scale CO2. That's what the hops industry uses, is large-scale CO2 to do tonnage, and the solvent is very inexpensive. Again, the processing piece is a part of the entire thing in your bottom line and how you create these products. The ethanol extraction platform, it has been extremely popular because, well, for thousands of years, cannabis was extracted with ethanol. And these days, you can do an ambient temperature extraction, you can do a cryo extraction, you can do steam distillation to capture terpenes. That's how all perfumes pretty much are made, with steam distillation. And you can do solvent recovery. But the combination between ethanol and CO2 creates vast efficiencies and a much broader SKU. But you can start with either one of them and combine them later as your product line develops, as your business develops. Just recently, women have out-purchased men. This has been quite a long time coming, but we knew it was going to come because women control 85% of the household income when it has to do with health and wellness. So thinking about the female market is extremely important, as is people over 50, because they're conscious consumers. They are making a choice between drinking alcohol or having a vape pen or an edible, some other subtle way to imbibe. And they don't want to, especially people over 50, don't really want to drink anymore. They still want to have cocktail hour, but they don't necessarily want to drink. So keeping those market segments in the forefront of your product development is very, very important. To close, and I appreciate your time and attention, and I'm always available for questions or to dive deeper on any of these topics. But I just really want to underscore the importance of purpose. Modern business is about social equity and sustainability and organic and giving back to your community, and keeping that all in mind while you're doing product development and your whole and branding your entire company and these products and educating your consumers. educating the retail outlets about who you are and why you do what you do and how your products are made, how they were grown is really important. And that's business these days. If anybody's doing it any other way, that's more like the dog eat dog, let's not tell people what we're doing mindset. And that's not what modern consumers want. They want to know, and it's a great marketing tool for you to use. And the other thing I want you to keep in mind is this quote from Tesla, which I love. Science is but a perversion of itself unless as its ultimate goal is the betterment of humanity. And with that, I wish you a wonderful Earth Week, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.